we think of France as a land of eternal stability, a world of art, grandeur, and light. Yet beneath its elegant surface lies a history born of chaos and constant breaking apart. But for most of its history, the French nation was never supposed to survive. For over 1,000 years, this land has stood on the edge of collapse, surviving not by luck, but through a series of radical transformations that redefined what it means to be a nation. To find the real France, we must look past the monuments and touch the scars of a country broken more times than any other in Europe. The story begins not with a unified kingdom, but with a fractured map of warring tribes and crumbling Roman walls. How could a unified nation ever rise from such a violent, shattered map? After the fall of the Roman Empire, the territory we now call France was a collection of isolated territories governed by local lords who cared little for a central identity. It was the rise of the Franks, particularly under the leadership of Clovis and later Charlemagne, that first gave this land a shadow of unity. It was a fragile beginning, and, as we will see, it was nearly destroyed before it could even take root. The empire of Charlemagne was split among his grandsons, leaving the West vulnerable to Viking raids and internal betrayals. By the 10th century, the King of France held power over little more than the area around Paris, while powerful dukes ruled the rest of the land as independent rulers. The crown was a hollow symbol, ruling almost nothing. What could finally force these rival neighbors to see themselves as one people? This spark arrived in the form of the 100 Years' War, a conflict that brought France to the very brink of disappearance. As English kings claimed the French throne, the country was torn apart by famine, plague, and civil war between rival factions. By 1429, France was dying. Its treasury was empty, its king was in hiding, and its people had given up hope. It was during this moment of near failure that a young girl named Joan of Arc emerged, claiming divine inspiration to drive the invaders out. She didn't just win battles, she gave the French a reason to exist. Her presence turned a dynastic struggle into a national crusade, giving the French people a common cause that transcended their local loyalties. France survived this threat to its very life, but the cost was a realization that the old feudal ways could no longer protect the state. The monarchy began to centralize power, creating a professional army and a bureaucracy that could govern from the center. By the 17th century, under Louis XIV, France had become the most powerful nation in Europe, centered entirely around the person of the king. The Sun King's reign was the height of French prestige, symbolized by the glittering halls of Versailles. Yet this absolute power carried the seeds of its own destruction. While the elite lived in luxury, the common people bore the heavy burden of taxes and frequent wars, creating a deep resentment that would eventually shatter the old world. The year 1789 marked the most significant turning point in the nation's history as the French Revolution tore the crown from the head of the state. This was not just a change in government. It was a total collapse of the existing social order. The king was dead. The gods were gone. But what terrifying force would rise to take their place? The dream of liberty became a nightmare of steel. In the streets of Paris, the revolution began to eat its own children, and the guillotine never stopped falling. The nation was surrounded by hostile monarchies and divided by internal uprisings, yet in this empty seat of power, a new force emerged. Napoleon Bonaparte took the chaos of the revolution and channeled it into a continental empire, spreading French ideals across Europe through the force of arms. But empires are often as fragile as the men who build them, and Napoleon's eventual defeat left France searching once again for its identity. France had conquered Europe, only to find itself back where it started, alone and undecided. For decades, the country swung like a swinging weight between kings and republics, never sure which way to lean. The 19th century was a cycle of revolutions, restorations, and republics as the people struggled to find a balance between order and freedom. This internal struggle was interrupted by the arrival of the 20th century, which brought the most devastating tests the nation had ever faced. In the First World War, France became the primary battlefield of Europe, losing an entire generation of young men in the mud of the trenches. The physical and mental scarring was immense, leaving the country exhausted and fearful of future conflict. When the Second World War arrived, the French defenses collapsed in just 6 weeks, and the nation was occupied by Nazi forces. This was a moment of profound national humiliation, as the country was split between those who collaborated with the occupiers and those who joined the resistance. From the streets of Paris to the mountains of the south, the French people had to decide what they were willing to die for. General Charles de Gaulle, speaking from exile in London, became the voice of a France that refused to surrender, reminding the world that the nation was more than its territory. Following the liberation, France had to rebuild not just its cities, but its soul, leading to the creation of the Fifth Republic and a new role as a leader in a unified Europe. Today, France remains a nation of opposite ideas, deeply proud of its traditions, yet always ready to protest and challenge its leaders. France is proof that a nation is never truly finished. It is a fire that must be tended, or it will go out. France has survived because it learned to adapt, finding strength in its darkest hours and reinventing itself when all seemed lost. In the end, the tale of France is not found in its victories, but in its refusal to stay buried in the ashes. It is a journey that continues to this day, as the people of France face the problems of a modern world while holding on to the spirit that has defined them for centuries. Every nation's tale is a chapter in the history of us all. If you found meaning in this journey, please like this video and subscribe. Feel free to explore our channel to see how other nations survived their own moments of fragility. Your support ensures these stories are never forgotten. Thank you for watching.